Hello, and welcome back to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist, and today we're going to talk about categories. Categories are a next level, they're a more complicated topic, but they are extremely important and extremely practical. One of the things that I really hate about OWL-RDF is that the first thing that a lot of people want to build with it is a product taxonomy, right? You want to build some sort of sales catalog. And to do that, you run in immediately to one of the trickiest things about OWL-RDF being what I'm going to call a two-level system. We'll get into more of that in a bit. But let's just say categories are a tool that can help us solve this really difficult and practical problem that I expect a lot of you are going to run into. Okay, let's start off talking about what categories even are, what the term is, what it means. First off, it's confusing sometimes because all of these different ontology languages use something like class or set or group or collection or category, but when you go across to other applications or other programs or other uses, then people use these terms differently. So the example I always run into, I work with people who do Python programming, and then I talk about classes in OWL-RDF, and they immediately think about a class in Python. And while there's a lot of overlap there, there's difference too, and that's going to lead to confusion. So let's be crystal clear on what we're talking about with categories, which is just another one of those generic sounding sort of ways to split up the world. And here I'm borrowing from Gist. Gist is an ontology put together by Dave McComb and Semantic Arts. So here's Gist from Semantic Arts, and you can see they've got this periodic table of gists, like sort of the common elements that they use. We can zoom into it. And there's category. Let me look, though, also at my definition of category from my personal ontology. So here we've got it. Category is another class. It's a top-level class. It's a subclass of OWL thing. And here's how I define it. Category may be the single most confusing class in the ontology for ontology laypersons. It's incredibly useful, but is necessary in part due to limitations on contingent facts about how triple store ontologies work. In short, category is the class of all instances that are labels. Suppose we're looking at a bunch of contracts somewhere in the sales pipeline. We might want to tag some of these contracts as prospective, and some as unlikely, some as imminent. In that case, we should create a specific subclass of category, say contract status, and then we can create individual statuses like prospective contract. And then we can tag our particular contract, like contract 1, categorized by prospective contract. When I think of what are categories, I think of them as labels. So we have classes, which are sort of these more robust sets of entities, and then we have a category, which each instance of category is a label that I can apply to things. And so that's where I have sort of this paradigm example of we've got contracts. We might say this contract is imminent or in the pipeline or canceled or what have you. This imminent, canceled, pipeline, each of those are categories, and they are the labels that we can apply to particular other individuals. Why would we even go about making a category in the first place? Well, again, in the definition, what I refer to is that ontologies in the OWL-RDF framework are in a two-level system. Classes, higher up, and then individuals. We want to split our world up into things that are in one of these two groups. So now let's think about a couple of practical real-world cases. And again, this is why I say that almost always when I have new clients and they're learning about OWL-RDF, I wish they could get a big introduction to OWL-RDF, like hopefully you all have on this channel, without having to run into this issue. But this issue comes hard and fast when we're building taxonomies of products in some sort of sales catalog. Let's say we're going to go shopping at the Home Depot. Okay, so here we are. We're looking at the Home Depot. We can see it's already spooky season. It's terrifying. Give me the rest of summer first before Halloween decorations come out. We're going to shop all, and then we've got classic taxonomy. We can open a window on the side, and we can look by departments, and then baths and faucets, and then shower heads, and then bathroom collections, and then we can go down and find a particular product. Okay, there we go. Look at this beautiful faucet for $196. Now let's think about how we would want to represent this if we were building it out in an ontology. We really have two choices, right? Do we want this faucet here to be a class So we put it on the higher level, or do we want that to be an individual? Let's go start making a turtle file and see what happens, see what makes sense to do here. Okay, so let's drop over here. Let's make a empty shell of an ontology, and we've got two options. We've got faucet. Okay, so this is a product in our product catalog, right? And we can either make it now a class, or we can make it a named individual. And we have to decide, where do we want it to be? On the one hand, it feels like a class, right? I'm going to buy a Finlay faucet, and it was an instance of the Finlay faucet class, right? So we can have Casey's faucet, individual, and more than just a named individual, which I'll try and spell correctly, it's a Finlay faucet. Great. So these two things hold together, right? We've got the class of all of the Finlay faucets, and then we've got my particular one, which we can say things like that I own it, right? Cool. What do we do alternatively here if we want to make Finlay faucet a named individual? And then I buy, so let's just say we've got some sort of dividing line here, right? We're considering this alternative. Now, if I get Casey's faucet, that's still got to be a named individual, right? But what do I want to do with that? How do I relate that individual to the Finlay faucet, another individual? And this is where categories come into place. I could just make Finlay faucet here a category. It's just a category. So it's a type of faucet, right? And now I can say my particular faucet here is categorized as, whichever term you like. I think it's categorized by and just, and that's what I typically use, a Finlay faucet. And what you can see here is these two options actually aren't that different, right? I guess I can say that this is categorized by this. The difference here is that if I make Finlay faucet a category, then I have to say that my particular faucet is categorized by that category. And instead, if I make it a class, then I say my thing is an instance of that class. These two things have the same amount of triples, right? It's the same structure. The question is just, do we want Finlay faucet to be a class, or do we want it to be a category? And so far, I don't think I've given you really any more resources to prefer one of these or the other, but the next piece might help you on this front, which is that we might want to further describe what a Finlay faucet is, right? Like if I'm building my product catalog, if we looked at the Home Depot's website or whatever, we have like bathroom products. And that's a class of all of our bathroom products. That seems pretty sensible. And then I have faucets and fixtures or something like that. And that is a subclass of a bathroom product. And then we might want to just have faucets. Cool. So now I have this Finlay faucet. And do I want to say the Finlay faucet is a subclass? Get rid of that extra colon. That seems plausible enough. By the way, this is terrible naming conventions. I should not make these classes plural. It's not a huge deal on this, but got to model good behavior for y'all. Okay, so Finlay faucet is a subclass of faucet on this view, and then my faucet is an instance of the Finlay faucet. Great. Down here, if we have this approach, right, where we want to make this a named individual and it's a category, well, now it's going to be an instance of faucet. So faucet is the class that Finlay faucet is an instance of. And then my faucet is categorized by this class that's an instance of faucet. Still, maybe not a huge difference, but we're just thinking about what level are we putting each of these things on. Are they sets or are they individuals that are then categories? Now here's where the rubber really meets the road on which decision to make. Because again, between these assertions and these assertions, we have the same number of triples. You can pretty much do the same things with them. Going to be a little different in terms of inference. The thing here is OWL is designed, maybe I'll just write this. OWL is designed to be about individuals. So whenever you're building an ontology, you should be thinking, what do I want to say things about? And the things you want to talk about should be your individuals. There's three types of properties, right? We have object properties, annotation properties, and data type properties. And annotation properties are just supposed to be documentation, right? There are comments that are telling us like meta information about who created a term or why they created the term. The real work that we do in the ontology, the semantic work, is supposed to be object properties and data type properties. So if I'm focused on describing something in my ontology, I want to be able to use object properties to talk about it, which means the things that I want to talk about, I want to be named individuals and not classes, if at all possible. Or at least that's where OWL is nudging us. And now we can maybe see a little bit clearer why we might prefer one of these to the other. So if I'm the Home Depot, right, if I'm selling this product, I actually don't care that much about Casey's faucet, right? I mean, I hope he buys it. I hope I make money from him. But I'm not probably going to be writing anything about the individual customers' products within my ontology. Maybe way down the line, if we're developing something like that, we want to report like which customers bought which product and like record whether there were any sort of warranties exercised on them, then maybe we're representing Casey's faucet. But most of the time, I care about the stuff I'm going to be showing on the website. And the website is going to talk about the Finlay faucet. It's going to tell me what its price is. It's going to give me descriptions of these things. It's going to tell me like probably specifications about what it weighs, right? Apparently they don't have any of that detail. Oh, here we go. Right, so it gives me its flow rate and stuff like that. So if I want to go back here and say, oh, I want to give a flow rate for the Finlay faucet. Well, if Finlay faucet is a class, and I come up with something like flow rate, well, now this is a class. So I can't say that flow rate is an object property, or, you know, it was something like 1.2. Let's just say we want our flow rate in gallons. This is a bad representation, but let's ignore it for a second, just so that we can talk about the class individual distinction here. If I want to say that Finlay faucet has a flow rate in gallons of 1.2, since it's a class, this is an annotation property. And since it's an annotation property, it's not going to be amenable to some of the resources for OWL-RDF reasoners or other things for making this an object property. Instead, we're just going to be viewing this the same way we would view comments or other things. So this is actually really not well suited. If I want to say things about the flow rate and I want to make this a class, I'm going to have to make some sort of OWL restriction here where I say the Finlay faucet is a subclass of all of the faucets that have a flow rate of 1.2 gallons per minute. Alternatively, if I make it a category and I want to shove this in, I am perfectly at home to do so. This is an object property. This is an individual. So we can make object properties where this is in the first position of that relationship. So let's review the problem. We have classes and we have individuals in OWL-RDF. And these two levels are great. Individuals are the things we want to talk about because that's where we can use our object properties to relate one thing to another. And when we're doing something like a sales catalog, a product catalog, there's a temptation to put our product types as classes because they're the sets of things that individual people can own. There are all of the faucets, there are the Moen faucets, there are the Finlay faucets, right? And those are things that my faucet might be an instance of or not. But while that's a temptation, if I'm building my product catalog, I probably want to say things about the Findlay faucet, and I probably want to use object properties to do that. And so that drives me to want my Findlay faucet not to be a class of all the Findlay faucets, but instead to be a individual. And I can make this individual what we call a category, and then I can take Casey's individual faucet and I can say that's categorized by that category. So I'm sort of demoting that type of faucet from class to individual, and I'm kind of putting my other individual over here and having a sort of punning type of property to relate another individual as being a type of something that is a category, which is also an individual. That's the structure. Should you do individuals or classes in cases like this? There's no easy answer to that question. For my money, I want usually to leave those types of things as classes, and then I probably use OWL restrictions or sometimes type level annotation properties to relate things. So if I want to talk about the Findlay faucet and say that has a flow rate of 1.2 gallons per minute, then I can say that at the type level instead of saying it at the individual level. I give you that as a thing that I do, not even necessarily as a recommendation, because that brings some other baggage along with it. You have to deal with a more complicated OWL restriction or type level properties, and that's a whole nother can of worms that you have to do. You have to think, am I just building a more self-contained product taxonomy and catalog, and am I never going to be really that interested in the individual products that a person buys? I only want the type of product that they're going to buy, right? So I don't care about Casey's faucet. I care about the Findlay faucet, of which Casey's faucet is an instance. Then go ahead and demote those product types down to the individual level. That will work just fine for you. If you want to connect your ontology to something else where it already has made a decision about whether something is a type level or an individual level, this category versus class, then that's the other main consideration. Then there's some impetus for me to make the same decision that they did so things line up. Okay, let's summarize. Categories, which are sort of started in GIST. I'm sure other people have different names for them, but that's sort of where I trace the name category back to, is a way of shoving a class down to an individual level, and then we can say that things are categorized as it rather than they're instances of it. It gives us another structure, which looks pretty much the same as using something as a class, but what it really does for us is it unlocks the ability to use object properties to talk about the things that we're primarily interested in, rather than having to use annotation properties or go OWL restriction routes or other things to say the kind of semantic information that we want. This is a really complicated topic. If you have questions about how you handle something on your own, shoot them down in the chat below. I would love to see what sort of issues people are dealing with. The other thing to do is just play around with it. Try building it both ways for a little bit and see if one of them feels more natural to you. In the end, the structures are going to be isomorphic. You're going to be able to go back or forth between the two of them. And so either route is going to be fine, but some things are going to be a little easier. Some things are going to be a little harder depending on which choice you make. Good luck with it. Let me know what you go with. Let me know how it turns out for you, and I'll see you in the next video.